correction. She's actually against, a correction on the matchup. She's against Oliver Tomajko on Boros Feather. So we do, the player I mentioned there, we do have Sam Lawrence on Simic Nexus on, that is our time-shifted match.
Right.
So this match between Barich and Tomajko, this is actually a really interesting one when you get two attacking red decks against each other.
And a lot of this is going to kind of come down to which half of the deck Tomajko draws. Tomajko is probably going to know what Aaron's doing going into the match, right? It's pretty late in the tournament. Both of these players are notable, and Aaron has a style, let's be honest. She likes attacking.
Right.
So he likely knows that Aaron is doing something aggressive, and there are some cards in Tomajko's deck that are going to be great and some that are just awful. Say Adonto Vanguard, for example, very weak against burn strategies, not good at blocking, keeping you alive, etc. And some of the things like Feather, God's Willing are going to be very strong here.
Get two Lava Runners to start for Aaron. Now, I think you mentioned that on Oliver's side, cards like God's Willing, Sheltering Light, Feather, even Gird for Battle to a lesser degree may be good in this matchup.
Yeah, Gird for Battle is one where you want to find a sort of pocket to resolve it when Aaron doesn't have any burn live. But if you can do that, it is good at getting your creatures out of lightning strike range.
Aaron, she attacks in with get two Lava Runners. Spectacles light up the stage and makes a second Lava Runner. The light up the stage found two mountains, so her land drops are taken care of for these next two turns.
This is actually a great start for Barich because it doesn't force her to use any spells at a time when she wouldn't want to, and she gets to keep just kind of executing her own game plan and putting Tomajko on the back foot by virtue of her being on the play.
And I really like this. Aaron with two Lava Runners. One more spell will make them both 2/2s. When she's playing 2/2s for 1 and Oliver is playing 2/2s for 2, Aaron's ending up on the better end of things, and she attacks in for 5.
We call that the Goblin Guide.
Yeah. Lava Runner really impressive here. Turns into a Goblin Guide not after just 2 turns.
Yeah, that turn 2 light at this stage is just one of the big things that keeps the red deck so viable in these formats where it may feel like it's easy for them to get outground otherwise.
Oliver makes a second 10th District Legionnaire. Now, notably, he has Temple of Triumph up. It's the Ember Hauler from Barich.
And this is something about Aaron's take on Mono Red Aggro this weekend. It's a little bit different. Rather than having the Wizard package of Viashino, Pyromancer, and Wizard's Lightning, she's leaned into Ember Hauler and Skewer the Critics in order to lean up into the card Chandra's Spitfire.
Like this, the attack in. So Aaron plays the Ember Hauler pre-combat there because she doesn't want Oliver blocking and using God's Willing. By having Ember Hauler on the table, Oliver can't make that play and ends up just trading away his Legionnaire.
Right, and that's something that Barich feels pretty good about. A lot of the time, since Barich's deck is so much more linear, she just wants to try and whittle down Tomajko's resources because Tomajko does need to have a creature in order for a lot of his cards to have any effect, like that Gird for Battle we brought up before.
Right. Shock on Oliver's side takes care of the other Lava Runner. Actually, Oliver takes the damage there before shocking. So another left stage for Barich. Her last 2 cards out in exile there, Mountain and another Fanatical Firebrand. She's got Tomajko down to 12, but 2 cards in exile, 1 in hand, is running low on resources.
Yeah, the thing here is that she's really just trying to do her best to play to the battlefield rather than anything else.
Feather, the play for Oliver. And you see there, he actually is willing to shock in a Sacred Foundry to get that onto the board.
Yeah, and that's Tomajko just wanting to hold up this God's Willing in order to protect Feather.
Aaron casts both cards in exile. 4 points of burn on the table. 2 from Ember Hauler. 1 each from the Firebrands. She's looking to get Oliver down from 10. So 4 there, she needs 6 more damage. See on her face, not immediately sure how to play it, and it looks like she'll pass the turn.
Right, and this is the spot where Aaron's trying to figure out if she actually needs to answer this Feather, or if she can just try and convert the creature she has on the battlefield into burn spells, rip a couple of lightning strikes, Skewer the Critics, and so on, and slam the door shut from there. Since Aaron knows she has several draw steps, this Feather can't afford to attack.
And it doesn't. Oliver does follow it up, though, with Dreadhorde Arcanist. The 1/3 can cast instants from the graveyard. Oliver has a shock ready for the Arcanist. Yeah, land number 6 for Aaron. We have Legion War Boss from Tomajko. Now, the way Tomajko's been posturing this game, it really feels like he has one of his white instants, whether it's Sheltering Light or God's Willing.
Yeah, here and before we saw that shock on the instep when Tomajko had to do it had the opportunity to do it mid combat, and the reason for that was so he could hold up a God's Willing to try and protect his creature, and then after that there wasn't much of a point to do it during the second main phase, so doing it in the instep made more sense. But here Tomajko has more or less identified that he wants to show that he is able to protect his creatures, or at least make it look that way to make Aaron play a certain way. And if it makes Barich play more defensively or more conservatively, then that's going to buy Tomajko time in a matchup in which he's the defender.
Legion War Boss Oliver decides it's finally time to start attacking. Stacks with the Goblin token and the Dreadhorde Arcanist. The Arcanist is going to cast the shock from his graveyard at Ember Hauler. In response, Aaron uses Ember Hauler to attempt to shoot Legion War Boss, and here is the God's Willing. Attempts to save the War Boss. If this works, it will be exiled to Feather, a pretty big win for Oliver. And Aaron decides she just can't let that happen, so she'll shock again in response to take care of the War Boss.
Right, and that was Tomajko just wanting to get the card off of the battlefield and forcing Barich to use the resources from her hand.
You're right. I mean, Aaron, she had Ember Hauler and Shock, 4 points of burn, and none of them went upstairs.
Right, exactly.
Get you Lava Runner for Aaron. She attacks into a 3/4. And Tomajko will block. And Barich, that's the last 2 damages, both Firebrands. She trades the board away to take care of Feather.
Right, and Aaron doesn't really feel very good about this, but knowing that it's basically Dreadhorde Arcanist and this Goblin versus the 2 of them top decking, that's not much of a clock.
Yeah, now Oliver did have a couple cards left in hand, and one of them looks like was another copy of Legion War Boss. So the War Boss will hit the table, 3 damage comes in. And Aaron in a tight spot. Her top deck, Ember Hauler, but no cards in hand. Oliver still at 10. And we'll shoot away the War Boss, leaving Oliver with 2 tokens, a Dreadhorde Arcanist, I believe another Arcanist in his hand.
And this really is just a race at this point where Aaron needs to find some burn or an Experimental Frenzy, some light up the stages, some ways to use her mana off the top of her library.
Swinging for 3, Barich to 15. Oliver's last 2 cards, a Danto Vanguard and another Arcanist. And for Aaron, it is land number 8. No help from Oliver, an attack in for 7, another Dreadhorde Arcanist. 1 more draw for Aaron. It's Goblin Chain Whirler. That actually keeps her alive. It's an excellent draw.
Yeah, that's close. The big issue here is that Dreadhorde Arcanist can give a Danto Vanguard protection from red because of the God's Willing in the graveyard, and that's going to be lethal.
And that's lethal, so Oliver, that's why you saw him pay 4 mana to life to protect the Vanguard.
Right.
Good play.
Oliver knew that it was basically deterministically lethal at that point because of Aaron being hellbent.
You see him find the tactic right away, and Tomajko is up 1-0.
That was a really tight game. Barich was able to get out ahead in the early turns, and there's a point where Tomajko may have played a bit more conservatively at Aaron and sandbagged a land or 2 in her hand, but when you play cards like Light at the Stage and Experimental Frenzy, you're so heavily incentivized to just play your mountains.
Right. Well, I think Oliver was under enough pressure that even if Aaron bluffs by holding lands in her hand, I'm not sure it changes the way Oliver plays.
Right, right.
Your bluff can't be strong enough that your opponent is forced to call you.
Right. I mean, it's just something to the effect of whether or not Tomajko pulls the trigger on that God's Willing on the last turn, for example, when that could lose the game potentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. So 1-0. We look toward the sideboards of the players, and especially in a red mirror, sideboarding is a key part of the matchup.
Right, so here Tomajko has a few cards that he could look to, but most of what he's trying to do is get some of the cards that require him to have creatures in play out of his deck. These are your Gird for Battles, for example. Reckless Rage is a little bit riskier since it requires you to have something in play and so on. Right,
in a red mirror, oftentimes what you'll see is both players sideboard in more removal and some larger, beefier threats. So a card like, as you mentioned, Gird for Battle, Reckless Rage, can be risky because Aaron's already planning to kill all his creatures.
Right, exactly. And then there's a point where Adano Vanguard is also not great. I know it was the thing that literally killed Barich there in those last couple of turns, but it doesn't line up very well against Chain Whirler most of the time, and if Tomajko had had it much earlier in the game, it would have been more of a liability.
Right, you just can't pay 4 life for it very often.
Exactly, but then we look in the sideboard at these copies of Gideon Blackblade that Oliver has access to, which can give lifelink to the other creatures in his deck, as well as just being a reasonable threat that's hard for Aaron to actually check effectively.
Yeah, that looks like the kind of threat I'd want in the matchup.
Exactly, so you're just cutting something like your Adona Vanguards for your Gideons, where it's a fairly natural X in, X out, and so on.
It is game night somewhere. That is with Star City Games. We have game night. You can receive sleeves and tokens for playing in events at stores near you. For July, the Down Undead, our most recent addition, the koala to the creature collection, is being given away, and you can find a store near you at starcitygames.com/game night.
I actually really like the creature collection sleeves. I used the mouse ones for such a long time. Those are some of my favorites.
What's your favorite 0/1 cleric? Do you have one?
I really like the Down Undead from this month's SCG Creature Collection, where you can go to go.starcitygames.com/game night for more information on how to acquire them.
I think good 0/1 creatures. Death Pact Angel. That one's an 0/1, right?
I'm pretty sure it's a 1/1.
It's too strong.
Favorite 0/1 cleric.
Got this. E2 Lava Runner, the start for Barich.
This is the formula. We saw it last game. It looked strong then. It can look strong now.
Second Lava Runner, very similar to last game. No light up the stage this time for Barich. But now we see the sideboard come into play. Instead of 10th District Legionnaire, Oliver's 2-mana play is Lava Coil. That's coming up from the sideboard.
Yep, and this is just Tomajko now taking on that controlling role, trying to whittle down the resources that Aaron has, because Tomajko's under the impression that, especially post-board, his cards, pound for pound, are worth more than hers.
And it's Dreadhorde Arcanist from Tomajko. And in this kind of matchup, when I look for creatures I'd want on a Boros side, Dreadhorde Arcanist is really close to the top of the list.
Yeah, it's something where you can say, shock a creature, attack, flashback, shock a creature, or if you Defiant Strike the Dreadhorde Arcanist, you can flashback Lava Coil and then know you're going to draw another card off the strike the following turn, and so on.
See there, Barich going to Lava Coil away. So it really is one of these post-board red matchups, both players trading removal spells with creatures, trying to control the board. And Barich draws another Lava Coil for Oliver's Feather, and it's going to be Defiant Strike. So Oliver can't save it, but he can draw a card off Defiant Strike, and he'll get the Defiant Strike back at the end step. So it is a 2-for-1.
I'm a big fan of this Lava Coil. Let's just take a second to look at this, where Barich just says, you don't have a God's Willing. Show me. Just jammed into the open white mana. I really like this play. You can tell that Barich is an Infect player in Modern and knows that they don't always have it. And the best way to play around those kinds of situations is figure out if they have it early, because now Aaron knows later on that Tomajko, unless it came off the top of the library, doesn't have a God's Willing.
It's a really quick way to identify not playing around things that you're unlikely to beat.
Yes, exactly. In a lot of ways, it lets you know sort of the rules of engagement.
Legion Warboss from Tomajko as a follow-up. That Defiant Strike now back in his hand. Let's see, before they move to combat, Aaron, she Lightning Strikes down the Warboss, keeping the board clean. But here's 10th District Legionnaire. Attacks in for 2.
Note the very fast attack from this 10th District Legionnaire. This is Tomajko's way of saying, even if I'm lower on life, this Legionnaire is going to be worth more than your Lava Runner later on, so he just wants to get in with it now.
2 for Barich. Her hand's actually pretty amusing here. We see Ember Hauler, third Lava Coil, and I believe the last card's another Lightning Strike, so just removal, removal, removal.
Yeah, and you're kind of paving the way for this Skidoo Lava Runner to be worth as much damage as possible. It's been worth 7 so far.
Yeah,
We play Lava Spike, right?
And I like this. It's 4 damage on the next attack, 4 damage, sacrifice 2 more. She doesn't actually need more creatures than this.
Right. She just needs to get things out of the way.
And because her deck's like this, one thing which has been unique about Erin's deck this weekend is instead of playing 4 Experimental Frenzy in the main, she's playing Chandra's Spitfire in the main and Frenzy out of the board. In this matchup, do you feel like this is the kind of thing where she has now put the Frenzies in because she's heavy on removal post-sideboard?
It depends, but more than likely, yes. So the awkward thing is if the board is clear, Lava Coil is another way where you can end up having to stop with an Experimental Frenzy when you're not happy with it. But for the most part, whenever you're grinding this much, you're just going to be happy to have those cards in your hand.
When it comes to drawing cards, Oliver gets the engine running again. He drew Feather, casts it, immediately Defiant Strikes the Feather. On end step, puts the Defiant Strike back in his hand, and Defiant Strikes it again. And I actually want to comment from Oliver. That's a really strong play. Barich was tapped out, so he just really wanted to make sure he got to get this Defiant Strike back twice.
Right, and that's because he knows, because this Ember Hauler's in play, all Barich needed was a shock or a Lightning Strike out of hand to kill the Feather in response to a Defiant Strike. And Barich has kind of demonstrated that she's willing to just say, all right, fine, show me the God's willing. You don't have it.
So again, we have Oliver now back on the back foot. He went to 9 on Erin's attack. Erin played out the rest of her cards, so she has 6 power in play, 2 damage from the Ember Hauler, but she's empty-handed. For Oliver, no board, 5 lands but 5 cards.
Right, and if Erin just draws a spell, Tomajko's facing down lethal.
Baffling End is where he will start, takes care of the runaway Steamkin. We know one of the cards in Tomajko's hand is Defiant Strike. Makes Dreadhorde Arcanist, the 1/3 can block here. Unless she draws something relevant. Erin only has 2 damage on the board right now. She'd really love, I think, a Goblin Chain Whirler here.
Goblin Chain Whirler would be very nice. It's very likely that she would not complain at all about a Chandra Acolyte of Flame off the top.
2 of those on the board.
It really helps her lean into the more grindy plans.
Yeah.
If she
Any
decided-
removal spell here plays.
Right. Any, let's say, Tibalt Rakish Instigator is probably not something she would necessarily complain about. It doesn't help her push through damage immediately, but it is worth damage.
Two mana. She draws Ember Hauler. That's an interesting one. The issue about her attacking in is she knows Oliver has Defiant Strike in hand.
Right, unless you want to have this be a 2-for-1, you're just not going to make any kind of headway.
She can't. She'll say go. But there's some issues because she's now empty-handed. There is a Defiant Strike in Oliver's hand and a Lava Coil in his graveyard. What happens when Oliver pre-combat Defiant Strikes here? She's really going to have a decision to make.
Yeah, the line there would likely be, let's say, Oliver goes for this Defiant Strike to see Ember Hauler, maybe both the Ember Haulers go after the Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Yeah.
The other side of things is if that does happen, Erin just lets it happen, and then all of a sudden Oliver doesn't have this Arcanist to block with anymore.
Right, so she might just let it happen, let Oliver attack, let him Lava Coil the Gitu Lava Runner, and go from there.
Right, and there's even a chance that Tomajko just feels like he would have to go for Ember Hauler with the Lava Coil, just because on the way back, 2 Ember Haulers attacking and then sacking themselves is 8 damage. That's just so much.
You see our 3rd copy of Feather from Oliver. Defiant Strike cast on Dreadhorde Arcanist. Feather trigger.
Now she has a decision to make.
Yeah, I liked your idea of her letting everything happen, but now that Feather's on the board, it's closer, and it looks like she's actually still going to let it happen.
Yeah, at this point, it may just be reaching the point where the only way Erin feels like she can win this game is if she actually just throws things upstairs.
Arcanist attacks, Lava Coil. Cast from the Arcanist, targets the Lava Runner, that gets exiled. Erin's going to take 2. Oliver at the ready with that Defiant Strike to put it back in his hand. And actually looks like a double block from Barich. She bins an Ember Hauler to double block that 2-3.
Okay, so it looks like her line here is likely going to be hoping to just find the card Fry.
And Oliver on end step, going for that Defiant Strike again. And it's a mountain for Erin. She needed a draw there and did not hit it. And Tomajko, thanks to these Defiant Strikes, now with a 7-card hand. His engine is online. At 9 life, it looks like he has control of this game.
Yeah, Erin would basically need something where she chained Light Up the Stages to win from here.
For Oliver to close, it's his one-of copy of Aurelia.
Ooh, and honestly, that's a card that just has so much toughness and is worth so much damage.
See here also, this is one out of the sideboard for him, is the Aurelia. Going well with the removal, some big way to finish. Attacks in, Erin to 13, Oliver still with 7 cards in hand. We are 2 turns away, if that.
Yeah, this is looking like it's at least 8 damage coming in combat.
Lava Coil from Tomajko. Erin shoots 2 damage upstairs, Tomajko to 7, but here's 10th District Legionnaire. Here is Defiant Strike, and Erin extends the hand. So it is Oliver Tomajko snapping the winning streak for Erin. She was on a 4-match win streak, does pick up a 3rd loss, but still in contention.
Oh, absolutely. If she just wins the next 2 rounds, she's easily in. If she wins the next round with that 3-0 start on the day, there's a not zero chance she could just draw in if she wins the next round.
For Oliver Tomajko in 2nd place before the match, this win all but locks up a top 8 slot for him.
Oh, absolutely. 11-2 is the spot where it's pretty likely you can look at having an 11-2-2 be a safe lock for top 8. It's a kind of uncommon record, so we can't say for sure,
right.
But he's pretty comfortable at 11-1.
Yeah, even with a loss, he's unlikely to drop out of much farther. So he was a 2nd and 1, so he'll be 2nd or 1st
right
after this round. If he loses, for him not to be able to draw the final round, he'd have to drop from 1st to 8th with the loss, and I really don't see that happening.
Exactly. He's just got to be so comfortable with where he is right now. He picked up his losses quick. He picked them up well. We've been watching him all weekend.
Well, especially when you look at the other people who have metagamed the field. I'm looking at Aaron Barich. I'm looking at Ross Merriam.